I'm a 27-year-old woman, and I come from a big, loud family that thrives on Sunday dinners, chaotic holiday gatherings, and unfortunately, a fair share of drama. It's one of those families where everyone knows everything about everyone, but not in a good way. If there's a secret, it's guaranteed to make its way around the family tree faster than you can blink. And at the center of all that gossip is my Aunt Linda. Linda is the self-appointed queen of the family. She's in her early 50s, with a booming laugh and a knack for saying just the right thing to put people on edge without crossing a line, at least in public. Behind closed doors, she's the kind of person who keeps a mental catalog of everyone's mistakes, failures, and embarrassing moments, ready to weaponize them at the perfect time. Last weekend, Linda hosted a family dinner. I didn't go. I had to work late, and honestly, I wasn't too upset about missing it. It's not like Linda's dinners are ever relaxing. My cousin Emily, who's 25 and one of the few people in the family I'm close to, went and called me the next morning. She sounded almost out of breath when she said, "You're not going to believe what Linda was saying about you last night." According to Emily, Linda spent a good chunk of the evening talking about me. She told everyone I was too lazy to show up, and that I've always been entitled. Apparently, she even made a crack about my last breakup, implying that I'd end up alone because I'm too difficult to deal with. For context, I broke up with my ex, Anna, about 6 months ago. It wasn't messy or dramatic, but Linda has this way of twisting things to make them sound 10 times worse than they are. Hearing all this made my stomach churn. Emily said she tried to steer the conversation away, but Linda doubled down, insisting that I've been coasting through life, and that I'll probably end up unemployed if I don't get my act together. It wasn't just mean, it felt personal, like she'd been waiting for the right moment to unload all her opinions about me. This isn't the first time Linda's done something like this. She's been at it for as long as I can remember. When I was in college, she'd constantly make comments about how I chose an easy major. I studied communications, which she clearly thinks is a joke. She's called my mom, her own sister, selfish more times than I can count, and once suggested to my face that my brother must be cheating on his wife because no marriage is that perfect. The worst part? Most of the family just lets her get away with it. They say it's easier to ignore her than to start a fight. But I'm done ignoring her. Over the next few days, I started talking to other family members, trying to get a clearer picture of what Linda had been saying. I wasn't surprised to find out that her comments about me were just the tip of the iceberg. She'd apparently also been bad-mouthing Emily, calling her irresponsible for deciding to travel instead of settling down. She made a snide remark about my mom borrowing money from a friend last year, painting her as irresponsible with finances. And then there was the kicker. Linda told one of my cousins that another cousin's husband was cheating on her. No proof, no context, just a baseless, destructive accusation. It was like Linda had decided to make everyone's private business her entertainment for the evening. Hearing all this lit a fire under me. I wasn't just upset for myself anymore, I was angry for everyone Linda had hurt. She's been pulling this nonsense for years, and it's like the entire family has been tiptoeing around her, afraid to call her out. I started thinking about how I could confront her without letting her twist things or play the victim, which she's notorious for doing. Emily helped me come up with a plan. We realized that if we were going to confront Linda, we'd need to be prepared. She's good at deflecting and shifting blame, so I started collecting receipts, as Emily called them. I saved texts from Emily where she detailed what Linda had said about me. I reached out to my mom and a couple of cousins to get their accounts of what Linda had said about them. It was like building a case for court, but instead of a judge, it'd be the rest of the family. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. Linda had invited everyone to another family gathering next weekend. Word got back to her that I was upset, and true to form, she started spinning the story that I was being sensitive and causing unnecessary drama. But for once, the family wasn't fully buying it. Maybe it was because they were starting to realize they weren't alone in being targets of Linda's gossip. Whatever the reason, I knew this gathering would be my chance to call her out, and I was determined not to waste it. By the time the weekend rolled around, I was ready. I wasn't just doing this for me, I was doing it for Emily, for my mom, for my cousins, and for anyone else in the family who'd been hurt by Linda's toxic behavior. It was time to stop letting her get away with it. Update 1. The family gathering was at my aunt's house, the same place where this whole mess started. The room buzzed with tension the moment I walked in. Conversations were quieter than usual, and every now and then I caught people glancing in my direction. Linda was in the kitchen, playing hostess like nothing was wrong. She greeted me with an overly cheerful, "Oh, you made it," and didn't bring up anything from the previous week. Dinner was tense. I noticed how Linda was going out of her way to be extra sweet, laughing a little too loudly and complimenting everyone. But underneath it all, I could feel the unease. Emily sat next to me and quietly gave me a nod, like we both knew it was only a matter of time before things blew up. Once everyone finished eating and started moving into the living room, I knew it was my chance. I waited until most of the family was settled and then stood up. The room got quiet immediately, one of those silences that feels heavy, like everyone knows something is about to go down. I looked directly at Linda and said, "We need to talk about what you've been saying about me." Linda froze for a second, then plastered on a confused smile and said she had no idea what I was talking about. She laughed it off, calling me dramatic and insisting there must be some misunderstanding. But I wasn't backing down. I pulled out my phone, opened my messages with Emily, and read aloud exactly what Linda had said about me during her last dinner party. There was an audible gasp in the room. Linda's face shifted from feigned innocence to pure anger. She started stammering, claiming I'd taken things out of context and twisting her words. She threw her hands up and told everyone that gossip was just part of being in a family and that I was blowing things way out of proportion. That's when Emily stepped in. She backed me up and confirmed everything, saying that Linda didn't just casually mention these things but had gone on and on about them. A few relatives nodded, murmuring in agreement, while others looked uncomfortable, clearly not wanting to get involved. Linda, realizing she was cornered, decided to go on the offensive. She turned it around on me, saying I wasn't perfect either and implying I probably gossiped about her too. She said, Everyone talks about everyone else at some point. Why am I being singled out? That's when I pushed back harder. I told her this wasn't about random, harmless gossip. It was about the way she's been systematically tearing people down for years. I didn't stop there. I brought up the other things she had said about family members. I mentioned how she called my mom greedy and selfish, a comment that landed like a bomb in the middle of the room. My mom's face fell, and her eyes welled up with tears. She tried to brush it off, but the hurt was obvious. My aunt's husband looked shocked, and other relatives began whispering to each other. At that point, the floodgates opened. My cousin admitted that Linda had called her irresponsible for her travel plans. Another cousin said Linda had hinted at trouble in her marriage, causing tension between her and her husband. Every revelation seemed to embolden someone else to speak up, and soon it became clear that Linda's behavior wasn't just a one-time thing. It was a pattern. The biggest shock came when Linda's niece finally spoke up. She confronted Linda about the cheating rumor she had spread about her husband. The niece, visibly upset, demanded to know why Linda would say something so damaging without any evidence. Linda's response? She claimed she was just concerned and thought the niece had a right to know. That excuse didn't fly, and the room erupted into a heated argument. Linda, sensing she was losing control, tried to leave the room. She grabbed her purse and headed toward the door, saying she didn't have to sit there and be attacked. But I wasn't letting her get away that easily. I blocked her path and told her she wasn't leaving until she addressed the hurt she'd caused. She rolled her eyes and muttered something about being ambushed. I demanded that she apologize, not just to me, but to everyone she'd hurt. Linda refused, doubling down and insisting she had done nothing wrong. Her supporters, mostly her husband and a couple of her close friends in the family, tried to calm things down, but by then, the damage was done. People had taken sides. Some defended Linda, saying she didn't mean any harm and that family should stick together, while others sided with me, saying it was about time someone called her out. Before I left, I told Linda this wasn't over and that her behavior wouldn't stay hidden anymore. She laughed bitterly and said I'd regret turning the family against her. As I walked out the door, I could still hear the heated discussions continuing behind me. The family, once a chaotic but united group, was now divided. And Linda? She was still at the center of it all, holding onto her self-righteousness like it was a shield. One thing was clear, this was far from over. Update 2. The fallout from the family gathering was immediate. The next day, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Texts and calls poured in from family members, each with their own take on the chaos. Some were thanking me for standing up to Linda, while others were trying to convince me I'd gone too far. A few even tried to stay neutral, saying the whole situation was unfortunate and should be dropped. But it was clear the dam had broken. People were talking, and the stories about Linda were piling up fast. One of my cousins, who I hadn't spoken to in months, called to tell me about an incident where Linda had spread a rumor that her teenage daughter was going off the rails. It was a complete fabrication, but it had caused a lot of tension in their household at the time. Another relative shared that Linda had borrowed money from her a few years ago, promising to pay it back, but never did. She hadn't said anything before because she didn't want to rock the boat. The more I listened, the more it became obvious that Linda's behavior wasn't just about petty gossip. She had been sowing discord in the family for years, and no one had felt they could call her out, until now. Emily, who had been my rock through all of this, suggested we start a group chat to keep everyone on the same page. It started with just a handful of us, me, Emily, my mom, and a few cousins. But as word spread, more relatives joined, and the chat quickly grew. People were sharing their experiences with Linda, and it was shocking how similar the stories were. She'd gossip about one person to another, spreading just enough truth mixed with lies to make her stories believable. It was like she thrived on creating drama and watching the fallout. Linda must have caught wind of the group chat, because within days she started reaching out to people individually. She'd call them, frame herself as the victim, and spin the narrative that she was being unfairly targeted. For some it worked. A few relatives left the chat saying they didn't want to take sides. Others stayed quietly watching but not contributing. Then came the bombshell. One of my cousins recorded a phone call with Linda. In the recording, Linda admitted to making up certain details about the cheating rumor she'd spread. She claimed she'd only done it because she was worried about the niece's marriage and wanted to start a conversation. When my cousin played the recording in the group chat, it was like gasoline on a fire. Any lingering doubts about Linda's behavior vanished. By this point, the family was in full-blown crisis mode. I decided it was time to address things head-on. With Emily's help, I organized another family meeting. This time it wasn't just a casual gathering, it was a deliberate effort to confront Linda with the mounting evidence against her. Everyone in the group chat was invited, and most of them showed up, ready to finally hold Linda accountable. Linda refused to come at first, claiming the whole thing was a witch hunt. But when she found out how many people were planning to attend, she changed her mind and showed up anyway, arriving with her husband, who looked visibly uncomfortable. The meeting started with my niece and her husband confronting Linda about the cheating rumor. They explained how the accusation had caused unnecessary stress in their relationship and even led to a couple of sleepless nights arguing about something that wasn't true. Linda tried to brush it off, saying she was just looking out for them, but no one was buying it. The husband, usually a quiet and reserved guy, called her out directly, saying her actions had crossed a line. Next, my mom spoke up. She confronted Linda about the comments she'd made about her being greedy and selfish. For years, my mom had defended Linda, even excusing some of her worst behavior. But hearing her own sister say such cruel things behind her back had clearly hurt her deeply. Linda tried to backpedal, claiming she hadn't meant it like that, but my mom wasn't having it. As more people shared their grievances, Linda started to crack. At first, she tried to justify her behavior, claiming she was just misunderstood. Then she shifted to blaming the family, saying everyone gossips and that she was being unfairly singled out. But when someone brought up the recording of her admitting to lying, she couldn't deny it anymore. That's when the tears started. Linda broke down, accusing everyone of ganging up on her and claiming she was the real victim. A few relatives tried to comfort her, but most of us had heard enough. Someone suggested that Linda should apologize, but instead of taking responsibility, she doubled down, insisting she hadn't done anything wrong. The meeting ended in chaos. A group of relatives stormed out, refusing to reconcile with Linda until she took accountability. Others lingered, unsure of what to do next. Linda left in a huff, muttering something about cutting ties with toxic people. The fallout didn't stop there. Within hours, Linda was posting cryptic messages on Facebook, airing the family drama for everyone to see. She posted things like, "Funny how people turn on you when you've only ever tried to help and blood isn't always thicker than water." Some of her friends and distant relatives chimed in with supportive comments, clearly unaware of the full story. Despite the chaos, the meeting felt like a turning point. For the first time, the family wasn't brushing things under the rug. People were finally speaking up, and Linda's grip on the family was starting to loosen. It wasn't over, but it felt like we were finally heading in the right direction. Update 3. A week after the family meeting, Linda retaliated in the most dramatic way possible. She sent out an email to the entire family. It was long, full of dramatic language, and dripping with self-pity. She painted herself as the victim, claiming she had been targeted by a malicious campaign led by me. According to Linda, I was jealous of her strong personality and had been orchestrating a plan to turn the family against her. The email wasn't just dramatic, it was filled with half-truths and outright lies. She accused me of twisting her words and claimed that everything she said had been taken out of context. She also dragged Emily into it, accusing her of being my co-conspirator. Linda's email ended with an ultimatum. Anyone who continued to support me and Emily would be considered part of the problem, and she wouldn't hesitate to distance herself from them. It didn't take long for the email to cause chaos. Relatives who were already skeptical of Linda quickly hit reply all, calling her out for lying. Emily's mom, who rarely gets involved in drama, wrote a detailed response debunking Linda's claims point by point. Another cousin chimed in, asking why Linda didn't address the recording of her admitting to spreading lies. The email chain became a battlefield, with half the family siding with me and the other half trying to stay out of it. Then came the twist I didn't see coming. I found out my uncle, Linda's brother, had been secretly feeding her information from the group chat. He hadn't just been reading along quietly, he was screenshotting messages and sending them to Linda, giving her ammunition to twist the narrative. Emily was the one who caught on, noticing that Linda was referencing things she couldn't have known unless someone was giving her inside info. I confronted my uncle privately, and the conversation was heated. He defended Linda, saying she wasn't perfect but didn't deserve to be ganged up on. He admitted to sharing the screenshots but claimed he'd done it to keep the peace. When I pointed out that his actions had done the exact opposite, he shrugged it off, saying family loyalty came first, even if Linda was in the wrong. It was clear I couldn't count on him for support. Meanwhile, my niece, who had been furious ever since the cheating rumor came to light, discovered something that added a new layer to the drama. The cheating rumor hadn't come out of thin air. Years ago, she had confided in Linda about a rough patch in her marriage. It wasn't anything major, just a difficult period they'd worked through together. Linda had taken that private conversation and twisted it into a full-blown scandal. When the niece confronted Linda, the betrayal was clear. Linda tried to downplay it, claiming she hadn't meant any harm, but it was obvious she'd crossed a line. The niece didn't hold back, telling Linda exactly how much damage her gossip had caused. The biggest shock came from an unexpected source, Linda's own husband. He had been quiet through most of the drama, but during this confrontation, he finally spoke up. He admitted that even he had been hurt by Linda's behavior in the past. Apparently, Linda had gossiped about him to her own friends, sharing private details about their marriage. Hearing this from her husband left Linda visibly shaken, and for the first time she didn't have a quick comeback. At this point, I decided another family meeting was necessary. This time, I invited not just the core family but also extended relatives who hadn't been involved yet. I figured the more people who knew the truth, the harder it would be for Linda to manipulate the narrative. Linda refused to attend, claiming she was being ambushed again, but her absence only made her look worse. The meeting was eye-opening. Relatives who had been on the fence started speaking up, sharing their own stories of Linda's manipulative behavior. One cousin revealed that Linda had borrowed money from her under the guise of needing it for a medical emergency, only to use it for a shopping spree. Another shared how Linda had spread a rumor about her son dropping out of college when he was simply taking a gap year. With each story, the picture of Linda's true nature became clearer. By the end of the meeting, the majority of the family was on the same page. Linda's behavior wasn't just a series of small mistakes. It was a pattern of toxic manipulation that had gone unchecked for far too long. Linda's reaction to the meeting was predictable. She took to Facebook, posting vague but pointed messages like "some people thrive on drama and don't know how to mind their own business." She followed it up with specific accusations, calling out certain relatives by name and airing private family issues for her entire friend list to see. The post backfired. Relatives who had been neutral started siding with me, realizing Linda's behavior wasn't going to change. Then came the financial bombshell. Another cousin revealed that Linda had been borrowing money from various family members for years, always with a different excuse. When we started comparing notes, it became clear that Linda had been using the money to maintain her image, buying expensive clothes, throwing lavish parties, and going on vacations she couldn't afford. By the time all the pieces came together, it was obvious that Linda's actions weren't just hurtful, they were calculated. With this new information in hand, I knew it was time to confront her one final time. Update 4. The final meeting was set. It wasn't just about confronting Linda this time. It was about holding her accountable for everything, the lies, the manipulation, and now, the financial schemes. We chose my cousin Anna's house for the location. Anna was one of the relatives Linda had borrowed money from, so it felt fitting. Word spread quickly, and almost everyone who had been affected by Linda's behavior was on board. A few days before the meeting, Linda found out about it. She sent a series of frantic texts and emails to various family members, warning them not to attend. She claimed it was a smear campaign against her and threatened to cut off anyone who participated. The messages didn't deter most of us. In fact, they only solidified our resolve. If she was trying this hard to stop it, she clearly had something to hide. On the day of the meeting, we gathered in Anna's living room. It was a mix of emotions, nerves, anger, and a determination to finally put an end to Linda's antics. I started by laying out everything we had gathered, screenshots of texts, the recording of Linda admitting to lying, and most importantly, details about the money she had borrowed from multiple family members. The biggest shock came when I revealed the extent of Linda's financial deceit. She had borrowed thousands from various people, always with a convincing excuse. But the real bombshell was the money she had taken from our grandmother. Grandma, who had always been Linda's biggest defender, had quietly given her a significant amount of money over the years. It wasn't until recently that we realized just how much. Grandma was now struggling financially because of it. The room went silent as Grandma spoke up. She admitted she had felt pressured to help Linda, who always had a sob story about why she needed the money. Linda had promised to pay it back but never did. Grandma said she didn't speak up sooner because she didn't want to cause a rift in the family. That was the turning point. Hearing Grandma, the matriarch of our family, finally acknowledge the harm Linda had caused made it clear we couldn't let this continue. The collective decision was unanimous. Linda needed to be held accountable, starting with repaying the money she owed. Midway through the meeting, Linda showed up uninvited. She walked in, furious and defensive, accusing us of ganging up on her. She demanded to know why we were all conspiring against her. It was classic Linda, deflecting and playing the victim. But this time we were ready. I presented the evidence, the text messages, the recording, and the financial records. She tried to deny it all at first, claiming it was a misunderstanding or that we had misinterpreted her intentions. But with everything laid out so plainly, there was no way for her to escape the truth. That's when things exploded. Linda lashed out, accusing everyone in the room of betrayal. She pointed fingers, bringing up old grievances and trying to shift the blame onto anyone but herself. Her voice grew louder, but instead of intimidating us, it only strengthened our resolve. The most unexpected moment came when her husband, who had been silent throughout this entire ordeal, finally spoke up. He stood and said he couldn't continue supporting Linda's lies and manipulation. He revealed that even in their marriage, Linda had been controlling and dishonest. The room was stunned as he announced he was leaving her, citing years of emotional manipulation and deceit. Linda broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. In between her tears, she confessed that she had always felt insecure and used gossip to make herself feel better. It was the first time we'd seen a glimpse of vulnerability from her, but it didn't erase the damage she had done. Despite her confession, the family wasn't ready to let her off the hook. We demanded she take concrete steps to make amends, starting with apologies to everyone she had hurt and a plan to repay the money she owed. But instead of agreeing, Linda stormed out, vowing to cut ties with all of us. She yelled that we would regret turning against her and slammed the door on her way out. In the days and weeks that followed, the family began to heal. Without Linda's presence, the atmosphere at family gatherings felt lighter. Relationships that had been strained because of her gossip were starting to mend. Grandma, with the family's support, made it clear Linda would not be receiving any more financial help. Linda, meanwhile, grew increasingly isolated. She continued to post on Facebook, airing the drama publicly, but fewer and fewer people engaged with her. Relatives blocked her or unfriended her entirely, tired of the toxicity. Even her closest allies in the family started to distance themselves, realizing the extent of her behavior. As for me, I felt a sense of closure. It wasn't easy standing up to Linda, but it was worth it to see the family breaking free from her grip. For the first time in years, we were moving forward without the constant drama and tension she had brought into our lives. Linda's influence was finally waning, and the family was stronger for it. Update 5. It's been a few months since the final confrontation with Linda, and the dust has mostly settled. Family gatherings feel different now, lighter, calmer, and far less stressful. Without Linda stirring the pot, people are reconnecting and repairing relationships that had been strained for years. Even Grandma, who had always defended Linda, seems more at ease. Linda, however, hasn't disappeared entirely. Over the weeks following the confrontation, she started reaching out to family members individually. She called and texted a few people, including my mom, trying to spin her side of the story. She claimed she was misunderstood, insisting that she had always meant well and that the family had been unfair to her. For some, her pleas fell flat. Most of us had heard enough and weren't interested in letting her back in. The family agreed on a no-tolerance policy. We all decided that while forgiveness was up to each person individually, enabling Linda's behavior was off the table. If she tried to sow division or spread lies again, there would be no hesitation in shutting it down. Even Grandma, after much reflection, formally cut Linda off financially. She announced that she would no longer lend Linda money under any circumstances. It was a big step for her, considering how much she had enabled Linda in the past. Cut off from her usual financial lifeline, Linda began to feel the consequences of her poor spending habits. Rumors started circulating that she was struggling to keep up with her lifestyle. She had maxed out credit cards and was behind on some bills. Family members, who had lent her money in the past, made it clear they wouldn't be doing so again. For the first time, Linda was facing the fallout of her actions without anyone to bail her out. Then came an unexpected surprise. Linda's daughter, who had been estranged from her mother for years, reached out to me. She had heard about everything that had happened through the family grapevine and wanted to thank me for standing up to Linda. She shared stories about growing up with a mother who thrived on manipulation and control, explaining that it had taken her years to distance herself and build a life free from Linda's influence. Hearing her perspective was both validating and heartbreaking. It was clear Linda's behavior had impacted more than just the extended family. Meanwhile, family members who had been caught in Linda's web were finding their way back to each other. My niece and her husband, who had been deeply affected by Linda's cheating rumor, were working through the damage. They started going to couples therapy and were making progress in rebuilding trust. The niece told me that cutting Linda out of their lives entirely had been a huge relief, and they felt stronger as a couple because of it. Word about Linda's behavior spread beyond the immediate family. Extended relatives and even some family friends began hearing the full story. Linda's reputation took a serious hit, and her once large circle of supporters shrank. She still had a few loyal defenders, but most people saw her for who she really was. In a surprising move, Linda sent a text to a handful of family members, including me, offering what could loosely be called an apology. It was vague and half-hearted, full of phrases like "I'm sorry if I hurt anyone, and I didn't realize how my words were taken." It was clear she wasn't fully taking responsibility, and most of us chose not to respond. For me, it wasn't about holding a grudge, it was about protecting the family from falling back into old patterns. To reinforce that, I reminded everyone about the importance of boundaries. We couldn't control Linda's behavior, but we could control how we responded to it. Many of us agreed to limit contact with her or cut her off entirely. On social media, relatives began blocking her, making her cryptic Facebook posts lose traction. Without an audience, her attempts to stir drama started to fizzle out. Linda's isolation became more evident over time. Rumors circulated that she was trying to find support from friends outside the family, but it didn't seem to be working. People who knew her well were wary of her tendencies, and those who didn't were unlikely to get involved in her drama. As for the family, we've entered a new chapter. Several relatives have told me how grateful they are that someone finally stood up to Linda. They said it took courage to confront her, and they credited me with bringing the family closer together. While I don't see myself as a hero, it's comforting to know that my efforts made a difference. Looking back, I feel a sense of relief. The cycle of toxicity that Linda perpetuated for years has been broken. The family is stronger, healthier, and more united without her constant interference. There's still work to do. Relationships don't heal overnight, but we're moving in the right direction. In the end, Linda's downfall wasn't about revenge or proving a point. It was about protecting the people I care about and ensuring that her behavior could no longer cause harm. And as we gather for dinners and celebrations now, I can see the difference. The laughter feels real. The conversation's genuine. For the first time in a long time, it feels like we're a family again.